Hi, my name is Jonathan Fisher, and welcome to today's Pacific Northwest Railroad Archive Zoom program for January 15th, 2025. So welcome, everybody. We're going to have a really great winter-spring program schedule this year. Let me just talk for a minute about some of the great guests that we have lined up for programs coming up. In 2 weeks, my dear friend, Gordon Glattenberg from Santa Clarita, California, I can't seem to roll my R's this year anymore, will be joining us and talking about the LANSL line. February 12th, George Hardy will be with us. Welcome, George. And we will be talking about the Siskiyou line. February 26th, we're going to have Vic Neves talking a little bit about his event. He's going to talk about that here in a second. And then we'll also have Tim Rep on the program. And Tim Rep will be talking about.
I don't know why I can't get.
I gotta hang on here. I gotta
turn it off first.
I gotta mute Jack. There's Jack. Okay, he's muted. Jack, really glad to have Jack here today. It's not everybody gets to be 99 years old and be a guest on our program. So,
and I don't know where.
Let me go back and yeah. Sorry. Jack is excused. So back to live action. February 26th, Tim Rep and Vic Neves will be talking about his program. March 12th, I'm very, very excited about this. March 12th, 2025, scheduled to appear is Pete Lero of Lero Photography. Pete is, I was just on his Cumbres and Toltec charter back in October. I've been on some of his other charters. He is just great. March 26th, we had a power outage last fall, and that interfered. We actually had to cancel a program because of a power failure. So we're going to be rescheduling J. Craig Thorpe, and Craig will be talking about how he creates paintings. Very interesting. April 9th, Georgie Lee will be here talking about the restoration of the depot, former Northern Pacific Depot in Cheney, Washington. So that's going to be good. April 23rd, PNRA board president and history professional Russell Holter will be here. And Russ and I haven't really, formalized what he's going to do for a program yet, but Russ has always been a very, very popular guest on the program. And then we have the 2 dates in May left to go. And I'm not tipping my hand yet as to what those are going to be. So Vic Neves, I'm going to ask you to unmute, and I want you to talk about what you're working on for March, if you could for a moment, sir. Go ahead, please. Vic, you're not unmuted. You're still not unmuted. Not yet. Not yet. Keep trying. There we go. Try it now. Fire away.
Well, the best I can do, I didn't send you any photos, but I can give you a rough lineup if anybody needs to know. We're going to do.
Tell us about what program are you talking about?
Well, Winter Rail.
There you go.
In March.
I'm okay.
Hang on here. I got Jack's back online again.
It's the longest continuous slideshow in the country. We've been going on since 1978, and we got a pretty good lineup for this year. And included is a Tehachapi show, Railroad Paradise, by Scott Allen Sparks. It basically covers the whole mountain, not via drone, but a lot of hiking. This person,
back in the old days when we used to do it on foot.
He has done some serious hiking to get some of these images. And another show that my co-producer Evan Workema has finished is a show by the late Glenn Eikenberry. We lost him latter part of last year due to health, and he's finished up a show called West from Bakersfield on the Santa Fe. So it basically covers the Santa Fe from Bakersfield all the way to San Francisco. And then next up, David Lang, a local helper in production of shows, is doing a thing called Milepost Memories, or excuse me, Spreading Her Wings on over at Cascade Summit. Basically a snow-driven show covering the spreaders over Cascade Summit. And then Scott Odell, a local favorite from Seattle, is doing a show between Portland and Seattle on the double track main line. And then Jeff Mass is doing something on Ontario, Canada. And then Aaron Benson of Seven Idea Productions is going to do a little 30-minute video on the Toledo branch of the Portland and Western.
Oh, okay.
And then,
Right out your back door.
Yeah, and it's pretty amazing. It's a shortened version because some of his videos are over 2 hours long, and obviously doing a 2 hour show at Winter Rail will put everybody to sleep. So 30-minute teaser show will definitely get everybody going. And then 1,995 days of Northwest Rail photography by Nate Shedd. He's a guy who did a show a couple years ago on the trench, and he's come back with another marvelous presentation, and he's teaming up with Peyton Boyd, and it's really remarkable some of the images that these kids are doing right now. And then I got something from Liz Kylan, Mitch Nelson, and Randy Nelson, and that pretty much rounds up our lineup for this year.
Okay, and then for folks in the audience, Vic, that might be interested in your program, can you maybe drop into the chat a way that people could, for example, get tickets or want to be a vendor or do stuff like that. So for those that are interested in Winter Rail, it's a program that the Pacific Northwest Railroad Archive, wants to work, cooperate with, just like the Cascade Rail Foundation works with parks. And so drop that in the chat for anybody that's interested in the program. And thanks, Vic, for a little bit of a presentation. Hopefully you can come back one or two more times and promote the program again. So for those that have just dropped in or that are just kind of coming in right now, I'm Jonathan Fisher, the host and moderator of the program. And for those that would be interested in attending a future program, like I say, we've got a crackerjack lineup for this coming 2025 year. Drop a note in the chat and I will add you to our list of future participants or future viewers, I guess I would say. So let me see here. I need to figure out how to, I got to unpin Vic so that I can go to our guests. So I've gone to the gallery and now I'm going to go back and look at the speaker view, and there we go. No, Vic, you're still popping up here. Sorry, folks. There we go. Figured it out. Anyway, back to live action with some level of introduction. It's a pleasure and an honor for our program to have one of my very, very dear friends, Dale Sanders, on the program. And I really appreciate Dale being here. And yep. And I don't know how I got that to happen. That was not my intent. But I want to bring Dale on right now before I make a further fool of myself. And just say, Dale, welcome. And why don't you talk to us about your program today?
Well, thanks, Jonathan. Appreciate you having me, and congratulations on dragging me out of my cave to do a social event. So anybody that knows me knows that I really loathe these sorts of things, but I do make exceptions for the right people. So thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So
this presentation was originally done for the Western Pacific Historical Society at their convention this last year in Oroville. And it covers all of the railroads that were affected by the construction of the Oroville Dam. So without further blathering from me, let me share my screen and we can get this underway. And hopefully everybody can see that okay.
Looks good to me. Fire away.
Okay. As I said, Oroville Dam Railroads, presented by me, Dale Sanders. The Oroville Dam project was part of the California State Water Project. Started out in the 1950s to transfer water from Northern California to Southern California. And the key part of this was the construction of the Oroville Dam and the resulting Oroville Reservoir. It was constructed between 1961 and 1968, and it turned out to be the highest embankment dam in the world at the time, and it's still the highest one in the United States. This is the overall view of the dam and its spillway shortly after it was constructed. This is an aerial view of the Oroville Reservoir and the associated, hang on just a second, I need to get my pointer here. There we go. This is the Oroville Reservoir, which backed up three branches of the Feather River. This is the North Fork of the Feather going north, west branch of the Feather River, and down here is the Middle Fork of the Feather and the South Fork. Also associated in the project is this diversion pool called the Thermalito Diversion Pool, which diverted water from the outflow of the dam over here to the forebay. And then from the forebay, water went through another canal into the afterbay. And I will explain the purpose of these later on. The afterbay then flowed back into the Feather River. There were power generating stations underground beneath the Oroville Dam, and there was also a power generating station in the Forebay Dam. The area around Oroville, the history is marked by gold and recovery thereof. Not only in the earlier days when they used hydraulic mining and gold panning, but then industrialization came around and they decided to use gold dredges. And this is an example of one of the dredges working near Oroville. And the byproduct of the gold dredge are dredge tailings. Acres and acres of cobble and sand and rejected material out of the back of a gold dredge. And this material provided the basis for the construction of the dam. The dam location was just outside of Oroville, and this was the special train that the WP operated to the groundbreaking train, basically. This demarcation line here is actually the center line of where the dam will eventually be. They brought in a band from Lancaster, California to celebrate the event. And during construction, the railroads helped by transferring tourists from both the San Francisco Bay Area and Southern California for them to come up and take a look at how the dam was progressing during its construction phase. So the railroads that were involved in the Oroville Dam project are these. You have the original Western Pacific, which came from Stockton through Oroville, followed the Feather River all the way up on the North Fork of the Feather. And then you have the Feather River Railway, which ran from Feather Falls down to a junction with the Western Pacific at Land. And then you have the Sacramento Northern, which came north from Yuba City through Tres Villas or Oroville Junction and continued on to Chico with a branch that went from Tres Villas to Oroville. And then you also have the Oroville Dam Constructors Railroad, which was built to haul the material from the dredge tailing barrow pits up to the construction site. Before they could do anything with construction of the dam, they had to first relocate the Western Pacific around the base of Table Mountain through James, across the West Branch Bridge, through tunnels 7 and 8 to the North Fork Bridge. They are also talking about relocating the Feather River Railway, which they had surveyed a route. This route was never used. They instead convinced Feather River Railway to take a buyout from the state and convert all of their traffic to trucks. So prior to the dam, this is the railroad as it existed before any construction began. Again, you have the Western Pacific following the North Fork, the Feather River Railway coming down to Land, and the Sacramento Northern, which would be inundated by a portion of the Thermalito Afterbay. So the Sacramento Northern's original alignment, this is Oroville Junction, used to be called Tres Villas or Three Ways. This is looking due north. Yuba City is behind the photographer. Chico is to the left, and Oroville is to the right. This is Lorraine, which is very near where the Afterbay would inundate the right-of-way. This was an excursion on the Sacramento Northern using Bud's RDC car demonstrator. And this is sitting on the north leg of the Y, looking towards Oroville, and Chico is to the left. The Western Pacific original alignment. This is the beginning of where the relocation would start. This is the east end of Zephyr Siding, as it was known then, or Oroville Depot Siding, depending on the era. This is a westward train crossing the east switch at Oroville Siding. It's the eastbound California Zephyr, just a little bit east of that last photograph. And this view looks south down the Feather River. Tunnel 4 is to the left where the California Zephyr is exiting. A new construction bridge is being built over the Feather, which will be part of the relocation. In the foreground, you'll see this rock wall, which was constructed in between 1894 and 1896 in an ill-fated attempt to reroute the Feather River so that the gold miners could get to the main channel of the Feather River. They partially succeeded, but they could never get down to the very bottom where they wanted to get. This is the east portal of Tunnel 1, Table Mountain in the background. This is upstream, a place called Quartz. The present position of the dam would be directly behind the photographer in this scene. This is off the US 40 alternate bridge over both the Western Pacific and the Feather River. This is a westward California Zephyr. The dam occupies this very space today. It's an eastward freight to just east of where the dam is. And Land This was the junction with the Feather River Railway. So you can see in the distance there the bridge railings for the Middle Fork Bridge. This is an excursion train at land. This is under about 600 feet of water these days. This is the Middle Fork Bridge with the eastward freight. Another view of the Middle Fork Bridge, the westward California Zephyr. In the background behind the bridge, you can see a couple of other concrete piers. These are for the Swain Lumber Company right of way, which came up, crossed over the Feather River Railway, which is also in this view. The right of way is right back here. They crossed over and went up into the mountains to supply lumber to their mill in Oroville. Another view of the Middle Fork Bridge. And this is between Land and Bloomer. Also between Land and Bloomer. This is at Bloomer. This view is off the original highway alignment. Another view at Bloomer. And a meet at the east end of Bloomer in steam days, taken by engineer Norman Holmes. Another view at the east switch at Bloomer, the westward California Zephyr. And this is the Big Bend Powerhouse, started by Great Western Power and eventually became PG&E's Big Bend Powerhouse. Both were under construction, the railroad and the powerhouse, they were both under construction at the same time. Another view of the Big Bend Powerhouse. This is getting very close to the end of operations of the powerhouse. You look on the hillside in the background, you can see they've already cleared all of the brush to where the new reservoir will be. A little closer view of the Big Bend Powerhouse. This is a view at Las Plumas. The Big Bend Powerhouse is just to the left in the bushes there. Westward California Zephyr. But if you look at the lead locomotive on that train, it's a little cattywampus. It hit a rock slide and stopped there in a underwear soiling moment for the locomotive engineer. Another view of Las Plumas. Note the incline that goes up the mountainside from the railroad to the town site, and this suspension bridge is the walkway over to Big Bend Powerhouse. View at Berry Creek in steam days. Another view at Berry Creek with a westward passenger train meeting an eastward freight. The freight is taking on water. Eastward freight just leaving Berry Creek. And the westward California Zephyr exiting tunnel number 6. California Zephyr on board looking at the face of the west portal of Tunnel 7. And the west portal of Tunnel 8. And the east portal of Tunnel 8. So the station location of Isaiah. There was no sighting here, but it is a station location. And the west switch at David. This is meeting the California Zephyr at the west switch at David. Another meet at David. We are fortunate to have all these photos at David thanks to Jim Lekas, who his family had a cabin in the area and he would spend his summers up there and wandered down to the tracks to take photos. We're very thankful for that because this is an inaccessible area of the WP that is now preserved for history. Another westward freight at David. And a very late running Zephyrette at David. Normally this would have passed through in the middle of the night. Another freight at David. And a westward train passing milepost 231. This is the diversion dam for the Big Bend powerhouse under construction. And it was set at a specific height, and any water that went over that would just automatically flow over. It was an unregulated dam. And this is the intake for the water source for Big Bend powerhouse. The water went in here, went through a tunnel through the side of the mountain, and then went down the penstocks into the Big Bend powerhouse. This is the Western Pacific up here on the hillside. All the materials for this dam and intake were brought in on the Western Pacific. This is the station name sign at intake. And there's also a tourist sign for intake. These feather tourist signs were erected for passengers on board the California Zephyr, and it was tied to a pamphlet on board the train where they could see various sites along the way. And intake was a big enough site that they put a sign there for it. This was the last through train on the original alignment of the Western Pacific. This is the alternate 40 overpass, which was right at the base of the dam where the dam was going to be. So this was the last train through before they severed the line. And as the caboose of that train disappears, they start severing the line. And during drought years, Tunnel 6 can be seen for those adventurous types who want to get down in there. It comes out every now and then. Feather River Railway, their original alignment. This is at land. They were a common carrier road that served the Georgia Pacific Mill in Feather Falls. So they, even though they had logging locomotives, they were a common carrier and hauled pretty much freight cars. This is Shea number 3, crossing the access road into the Bidwell Bar recreation area. It was a nice swim hole down there that I remember swimming at as a youth. working upgrade. This is the South Fork River Bridge. Another view of the South Fork Bridge. In addition to lumber from the mill, they also hauled out wood chips. There's a Santa Fe wood chip car and a Western Pacific double door box car that has been converted into a chip gon, the roof removed. There's Shay number 2 at Onyet. Shay number 3 at the Onyet water tank. And Shay number 2 arriving in Feather Falls. Shay 3 at Feather Falls. And Shay number 2 at Feather Falls in front of the Art Deco Chevron gas station. This is July of 1961. And Shay number 2 switching the mill at Feather Falls. Another view of 2 in front of the mill at Feather Falls. And Shay number 3 in a reflection pond. That's actually the mill pond at Feather Falls. So this map shows the relocation and all the locations of the relocation. And coincidentally, there are the same number of tunnels on the relocation as there were on the original route. So there's a new tunnel 4 and an original tunnel 4 and an original tunnel 5 and a new tunnel 5, etc., all the way up to tunnel 8. And again, this shows the proposed relocation of the Feather River Railway, which never happened. Relocation. First railroad they needed to move was the Sacramento Northern. They originally had a main line of their own that went from Yuba City all the way up to Chico. And it was a pretty simple matter for them to relocate. They just simply put in a switch here at Live Oak to the Southern Pacific's East Valley main line. And they got on to the Southern Pacific main line and went north to Durham. At Durham, there was another switch that allowed them to get off of the SP and onto their own right-of-way to finish off their route into Chico. So from Durham down to Live Oak, the main line of the SN was abandoned. The Western Pacific relocation was a little bit more involved. This is the beginning of the relocation at Oroville. This is the east switch of the former Zephyr/Oroville Depot siding, and the new line being constructed on this alignment. And the Oroville Depot siding will be extended to 4,800 feet and parallel to the main line. This is the original main line taking off here to the left. There's a ballast train working the new line while a freight goes by on the original main line. And the eastward California Zephyr on the new main line, and you can see that the siding has now been extended to here. Excuse me. So this is the construction of the Feather River Bridge, first bridge crossing the river on the relocation. You'll note there's a second set of piers going in the event that the Western Pacific ever double tracked this section of railroad. That, of course, never happened, but the piers are still there. Another view of the bridge under construction. This is an aerial view of the bridge still under construction with the westward California Zephyr on the original main line. There's a view looking downstream of the original, they called it the Chinese Wall. It was, I can't recall the gentleman who started this, but it was called the Chinese Wall because it was Chinese laborers that built it. And then the new bridge still under construction in the background. Original main line crossing under the new main line. Once the new main line is in service, the original main line here will be utilized by Oroville Dam Constructors. And after Oroville Dam Constructors is done, this whole section will be filled entirely. During the 1964 flood, the diversion dam, which was still under construction, was overrun and the floodwaters ate away at the Oroville Dam Constructors right of way. But it was all easily repairable. And in the background, you can see the new Feather River Bridge crossing, and also visible is the Oroville Dam Constructors Western Pacific interchange. While they were building the Thermalito Diversion Dam, they had this massive cableway strung across the river, and the WP had this protective cage over the right-of-way directly under that cableway in case anything happened to drop off of the cableway, it wouldn't land on the track or a passing train. This is the completed Feather River Bridge before the reservoir was filled. And a view of the eastward California Zephyr crossing the bridge after the reservoir is filled. In the background, you can also see an Oroville Dam Constructors train underneath the Feather River Bridge. This location is known as Thompson Flat. This is coming down from Cram Siding, does this big S curve before entering a cut and then crossing the Feather River Bridge. Out of sight in this cut in the foreground is the canal that goes from the Thermalito Diversion Dam to the forebay. This is Cram Siding. And a view of a westward freight approaching the east switch at Cram with Table Mountain in the background. This is Elsie Siding. And about to cross under Highway 70, the relocation for Highway 70, California 70. This is a eastward Highline freight with 12 F7s. It was obviously a motive power move because according to the operating instructions, they could not have more than 6 operable F units online at any time. So the second 6 was just being transferred for a power move. This is a right-of-way going around what they call the James Loop. This is off the relocated Highway 70 overpass. And track components getting ready to go in. And a westward Highline train with 6 F units on the new alignment. Westward California Zephyr on the same alignment. And Tunnel 4 under construction. And an eastward Highline freight coming out of Tunnel 4. The view off of California 70, looking back into James. The west switch at James with Tunnel 4 in the background. Eastward California Zephyr at James. And an eastward freight at James. As the GP20s came online, they replaced the 6 F-unit sets that they ran on the Highline trains. So the Highline trains ran with 5 GP20s instead of 6 F-units. This is off the Highway 70 overpass looking east, James siding. And California Zephyr at the same location. Mid siding at James before the track. And same location with track. This is the east switch at James with a eastward California Zephyr. And one of the major bridges to be constructed was the West Branch Bridge. California 70 was on top, 4 lanes, and then down below was the Western Pacific. And if you'll note, there's also some railroad track up here on the top, which was only laid so that they could pour the concrete decking on the bridge. And I don't know what equipment they used on that piece of track. Underneath, looking through the West Branch Bridge towards Tunnel 5. An exterior view of the new bridge. And a ballast train coming off the bridge. They're laying ballast on the new right-of-way. Highway 70 is still under construction at this point. And a westward California Zephyr coming off the bridge. Dark Canyon. This is the short stretch of daylight between tunnels 7 and 8. This is during construction. Tunnel 7 is in the foreground, looking at Tunnel 8. There's a view from inside of 8, looking back at 7. A unique Venturi design to help exhaust diesel fumes out of the tunnels. View of the eastward California Zephyr going into Tunnel 8. And on the other end of Tunnel 8 was the North Fork Bridge. Here it is under construction in October of 1957. More construction views. There's a Western Pacific local in the background on the original main line. And a westward freight on the original main, the bridge in the foreground. The completed bridge with no track on it. And an eastward freight coming out of Tunnel 8 onto the North Fork Bridge. July 30, 1963. Another eastward freight on the North Fork Bridge. To the right is the original main line of the WP. Also visible in the foreground, this boom here protected the intake for Big Bend Powerhouse. Westward California Zephyr crossing the bridge. In the background on the original main line, you'll see some cars here. I'll get into that later when we talk about the Feather River Railway. Another view of the North Fork, taking from river level. And this exquisite view from William H. Mills, probably the best California Zephyr picture you'll ever see. Absolutely stunning. So during construction of the dam, now the relocation of the WP is in place. The Oroville Dam Constructors Railroad has been built to haul material from the barrow pits up to the dam. And Feather River Railway is still in service down to land, but to get their cars out, they operated the Western Pacific all the way from land up to intake, which more than doubled their track mileage. The Oroville Dam Constructors, you can see the rotary car dump here, which is where the material was dumped and then moved by a conveyor to the dam site itself. Here's the original WP Tunnel 4, which Oroville Dam Constructors used. The Oroville Dam Constructors crossed the Feather River 3 times. One here at the upper crossing near downtown Oroville, one in the middle crossing, and the lower crossing before they entered the Barrow area. There were 4 different loading loops, 3 loops for pervious material or the cobble that was dredge tailings, and the 4th loop was for impervious material, which was clay, which they dug out of a pit near the Oroville Airport. So we'll take a look at Oroville Dam Constructors. Oroville Dam Constructors was a consortium of 8 different construction companies that came together to build the dam because it was such a huge project. It was headed by Ullman Construction out of Nashville, Tennessee. To move the material from the barrow pits up to the dam, they had to construct their own railroad. This was the upper crossing of the Feather. And during construction of their railroad, they leased 2 Western Pacific switchers and a fleet of ballast cars, which you see here crossing the upper crossing of the Feather. The same ballast train. This is on top of the middle crossing of the Feather. Another view of the middle crossing with the ballast train. And dumping ballast on the approach to the middle crossing. Material for the rotary dump was also brought in by the railroad. Here you see the 2 leased WP units with a couple of carloads of material for the rotary dump. A little further along in the construction of the process of building the rotary dump. And to power the new railroad, Oroville Dam Constructors went to General Electric and ordered a group of U-25Cs, the very first of that model to be built. The first 4, 8010 through 8013, were built in September of '63. And they are seen, 3 of the 4 are seen here testing on the Pennsylvania Railroad at Renovo, Pennsylvania. The second group of U-25Cs, 8014 to 8016, were purchased in March of '64. And the last group, 8017 through 8019, were purchased in December of 1965. Before heading out to California, the 8013 was diverted to the American Railway Progress Exposition in Chicago, Illinois, And here it is seen on display, the GE display in October of '63. Also on display was a Union Pacific U-50. And on the electromotive division side, they had their GP35, DD35 demonstrator, and Alco introduced their Century 424 series here. On their way west, the Burlington route took the opportunity to test the new units. This was taken at Creston, Iowa in October of '63. Behind the power is the Burlington dynamometer car and an office car for all the officials. The Northern Pacific was also on this test, and this test resulted in both the Burlington and Northern Pacific purchasing rather large fleets of U-25Cs. This is kind of the movement of material in a nutshell for Oroville Dam Constructors. In the foreground is a massive bucket wheel excavator, which dug up the dredge tailings, dropped them into a mobile conveyor, which then dropped them into another conveyor, and that conveyor took the material down to yet another conveyor, which conveyed the material to the loader, and it went up on yet one more conveyor to the top and was distributed on this loading bin. And you can see in the background here, there is a train under the loading bin ready to be loaded. This is a close-up view of the bucket wheel excavator. It ran pretty much 6 days a week, 20, 24 hours a day. Dropping the material into these conveyors. And every time the bucket wheel reached the end of its row, this whole conveyor system would be moved further closer to the pile, and they'd go right down the line again. This is one of the loading bins. Each one of these loading bins was set up to load 10 cars at a time, and it took about 10 minutes to load a 40-car train. This is an overview of the entire Barrow Pit area. In the very background here, you can see the bucket wheel excavator. There's a loading loop over to the upper left. There's also the impervious loading loop here for the clay pit. And this is the furthest west loading pit. And they excavated the dredge tailings using a drag line. And that drag line would deposit the material into what they called athy wagons. They were basically a Caterpillar wheeled tractor pulling a bottom dump trailer. And then they would dump that trailer here, and it would go on conveyor up to the loading loop of the train. This is an overview of the impervious loadout, the clay pit, basically. There are 10 bins, and they can load 10 cars at a time, just like they could the cobble. Another view of the impervious loadout. The dam was constructed mainly out of dredge tailings, but they used the clay as an impervious layer throughout the middle of the dam to keep water from seeping all the way through. This is a loaded train, loaded clay train. You can tell the difference because the loads are more of a reddish color versus the grayer color of the cobble. This also shows a good view, and I'll talk about this a little bit more later. If you look at the front of this locomotive, you've got a cable coming out of the MU receptacle going down to this little circular device here underneath the coupler. This was an automatic air train line air system that the railroad developed on their own. This was not a commercially available item. so that they could couple and uncouple from the cars without having the engineer or a conductor get down on the ground. It's a view of a loaded cobble train going by the Thermalito shop. It's where they maintained all of their locomotives and cars. This is an empty train passing the Thermalito shop. And a loaded train crossing the lower crossing of the Feather. This was the approach trestle to the lower crossing. And an empty train crossing the middle crossing. All of these bridges were temporary and were completely removed with no trace after the railroad was done. Another view of the middle crossing. New highway bridge in the background is California Highway 70. This is off of the California Highway 70 overpass over the Oroville Dam Constructors right of way, looking east toward the dam. And the upper crossing, empty train coming back. To the left is the Fish Barrier Dam, which I'll talk about more here briefly. The loaded train crossing the upper crossing. And in the background, you can see the fish hatchery visitor area, which is under construction. The hatchery itself was actually down over here on the other side of this bridge. But this viewing area offered people a view of the fish ladder where you could go down underneath here and watch the salmon swimming upstream to the hatchery itself. This view of the upper crossing looking upstream. Directly behind the bridge is the Fish Barrier Dam, which prevented fish from going any further upstream. And they were diverted into a fish ladder to the left, which went up to the hatchery. In the background is the Thermalito Diversion Dam, which diverted water from the river over to the forebay and afterbay. This was the only siding between the barrow pit and the dam. Up above is the Western Pacific relocated WP right-of-way. Crossing under the WP. And this view of a loaded train going up the hill shows the WP crossing of the Feather in the background and also the Oroville Dam WP interchange on the left. And an empty train exiting Tunnel 4. Little tighter view of the same tunnel. And an empty train exiting Tunnel 4. Here again, the Chinese wall, Chinese wall in the foreground, down below here. New WP bridge, WP interchange. This is past Tunnel 4, looking upstream toward the dam. And arriving at the rotary dumper with a loaded cobble train. This is looking through the Wellman rotary dumper, the train arriving at the dump. And the view from on board the train. This equipment off to the right here is a car pusher. There's this arm that comes down here, drops down in between the cars like a crossing gate would, drops down and pushes the cars into the dumper, 2 cars at a time. They never uncouple. There's rotary couplers between the cars. So they push 2, they dump it, they push 2 more, they dump it, so on and so on. And then when they're done with the last car, the whole train rolls down here by gravity to be retrieved by the next train coming up. Here's dumping the material, goes into a conveyor, which then goes up to where the dam is being built. So the power brings the new train in, they drop it, they go down, they pick up their empties, and they go. They don't require the locomotives to be there while they're dumping the train. This device here was what I talked about earlier, that automatic air system to where the engineer did not have to get out of the cab of the locomotive to couple and uncouple to the cars. This device was on the end car of each train set with conventional air hoses between the rest of the train. And again, it was controlled from the cab. This little cable coming down here is the device that controlled it. And then you've got your uncoupling solenoid here to lift your cut lever. So they've dropped their loaded train here at the rotary dump and now are going down to pick up the empties. All the engineer has to do is walk to the other end of the power and he's good to go. And here they are returning with a set of empties. So on the night of October 7th, 1965, the Oroville Dam Constructors suffered its worst accident. This was right at the mouth of Tunnel 4, where a loaded train overran its red signal at the siding and collided with an empty train just emerging from the tunnel. Unfortunately, all 4 crewmen perished in the accident. So this piece of sheet metal here is the cab roof from the locomotive down here. And it was shoved up into the tunnel and cracked the concrete of the tunnel portal. And the whole thing caught fire because it punctured the fuel tank of the locomotive that's sticking up in the air. Here they're beginning the recovery process. They brought in another locomotive to try to pull this one from out from under the one that's up in the air. So this is the 8010, which was deemed unsalvageable. It was moved to the Thermalito shop and dismantled for whatever parts they could recover off of it. This is the 8016, which was also deemed unrecoverable, but they did salvage parts off of this, including the entire rear of the long hood. The 8014 was the trailing unit of the loaded train, and it suffered moderate damage. It was moved to the Thermalito shops and returned to service after considerable repair work. The 8011 was the trailing unit stuck inside the tunnel of the empty train. It suffered moderate damage. The insurance company actually wrote it off, but WP officials looked at it and they looked at the parts from the 8016 and said, I think we can put that back together again. So they moved the 8011 down to Sacramento shops, and as time permitted, they rebuilt it. Here it is outside the shop with the tail end of the 8016 now in place. And all shiny and new. Because the 8011, its original number, was written off by the insurance company, they renumbered the 8011 as the 8020. And here is the 8020 in service. After the derailment, the Oro Dam was very, very short on power. So they leased from the Western Pacific two former California Zephyr F3s. Here are both of them in service on the same train. And you can see off to the right the damaged locomotives involved in the Tunnel 4 collision. One of the F3s leading an empty train coming by the Thermalito shop. This is a horrible picture, but for what it shows, you've got two trains in motion at the same time, California Zephyr crossing the new Feather River Bridge, and two F3s demoted from hauling the California Zephyr to now hauling dirt on Oro Dam Constructors. Yeah, after the collision, Oro Dam Constructors put in an emergency order with General Electric for 3 more U-25Cs. And here they are on their way west on the Western Pacific, operating under their own power. This is at James. And after 6 or 7 years of hauling dirt, this was the last train of material to be delivered to the dam site. Last train, October 6, 1967. Total trains, 41,315. That's a lot of trains. So while the dam was being constructed, Feather River Railway continued to operate. They were operating by diesel at that point. This is a train coming off the 3% grade crossing over the South Fork of the Feather. Onboard view, looking over a couple of wood chip cars. And a train at Bidwell Bar headed up the hill. Another view at Bidwell Bar. The Bidwell Bar suspension bridge is under construction in the background. To build the bridge, they needed concrete. So at Bidwell Bar, Oro Dam Constructors made a batch plant for mixing concrete. They would dump the concrete into a hopper, a mobile hopper on a flat car, and Feather River Railway then moved that hopper up to the bridge. And you can see down here in the lower right, there's the little train, the locomotive, and the car. And up here is the aerial tramway with a bucket on the end of it. It would reach down over here, pick up the bucket, haul it up to the bridge level, and dump the concrete. And then they would repeat the process until they finished with the bridge. This is a diesel hauled freight at land. And Shay number 3 at land. This was an excursion train operated on the Feather River Railway and on the Western Pacific Main Line. This is crossing the Middle Fork Bridge. And the Feather River Freight crossing the Middle Fork. They will go down here to land just off to the right, run around their train, and then head up the hill on their own right of way. During the 64 floods, the several parts of the WP main line, the original main line, were washed out. Those needed to be repaired before Feather River could continue to operate, and they did repair those. But what was left behind, the dam was partially constructed, and it held back the floodwaters and created a temporary reservoir. When the reservoir receded, it left behind mud everywhere, which the Feather River Railway ended up having to clear. It also softened the right of way to the point where they put the diesel away and they brought out the Shay because the Shay was better at handling the bad track than the diesel was. Here's Shay number 3 taking on water at Las Plumas. And Shay number 2 on the excursion train taking on water at Berry Creek. The excursion train exiting Tunnel 6. And this is on the WP at David. Feather River Railway operated their freights up to here. There was no siding at intake where they could interchange cars with the Western Pacific. So they did all their switching around here at David. They would leave their loaded train here. They would go up light engine, pick up the empties that were at intake, bring them back to David. Then they would shove their loads back up to intake, come back down to David, light engine, reassemble their empty train, and head back to Feather Falls. There's a freight with a bunch of empties. They've just left the intake interchange and are headed back to Feather Falls. Diesel switching at intake. The North Fork Bridge railings you can see in the background. And a little bit better view of Feather River switcher, the North Fork Bridge. So post completion, the dam is all done, all shiny and new, filled with water. Governor Reagan commemorated the event. This was taken on May 4th, 1968. Approximately 3,500 people there to commemorate the event. This is an overview of the Thermalito Diversion Dam, the canal that extends from the reservoir over to the forebay. And also visible in this is the WP right-of-way going across Thompson Flat and up to Cram Siding. This is an aerial view of the afterbay. So the water comes out of the forebay into the afterbay and then re-enters the Feather River at this location. And you can see here the remnants of the farthest west loading loop of Oroville Dam Constructors. After the railroad was done with its task, all 8 remaining locomotives were gathered up for sale, and they were all sold to Louisville and Nashville. Here they are being picked up by the Western Pacific. They will be hauled over to the WP's Oroville Roundhouse to be prepared for their trip east. There's 2 of them sitting next to the Roundhouse, being readied for their long trip to the L&N. They operated for a short period of time in their Oroville Dam colors with L&N sublettering, but the L&N eventually repainted them into their own colors. The railroad itself was summarily dismantled, including all of the bridges, and there's virtually no trace of the Oroville Dam Constructors Railroad still visible today. The hopper cars, the bulk of the hopper car fleet was sold to Australia for use in iron ore service, but the Western Pacific did buy 10 of the cars. I'm not quite sure why, because they were rotary dump cars, and I don't know that the WP had a facility that they could dump these things. Feather River Railway became a truck line instead of a railway. And the Feather River Railway was in charge of dismantling not only their own track, but also the Western Pacific original main line. And here is that train dismantling the right of way of the WP. Feather River's 3 steam locomotives, Shay number 1, was donated to the city of Oroville and to this day resides in Hewitt Park up on top of the hill. Shays 2 and 3 were moved to the Oroville Roundhouse, where they sat for quite a while before they went on to their next homes. Shay 2 went to the state of California at the Railtown 1897 State Historic Park in Jamestown, California. It was operational for a while. It is now stored and awaiting future restoration. Shay 3 went to the Pacific Southwest Railway Museum in Campo, California, near San Diego. It resided there for years and years before it too went on to a new home. It was sold to the Cass Scenic Railway in West Virginia, was converted to coal, and is operational to this day. So what's left? Nothing but the original WP, which is now Union Pacific. All the other railroads are gone with very little trace that they were ever there. Take a quick tour of the current WP line. This is passing what they call the Equation milepost, just outside of Oroville. This was at the location of the old Zephyr siding, east switch of Zephyr siding. The new line was 4.1 miles shorter than the original main line. So rather than renumber all the mileposts from here to Salt Lake City, they established 2 points on the same milepost. It's kind of a unique milepost arrangement. There's a westward Burlington Northern Pool train coming through Oroville siding. Table Mountain in the background. And an eastward freight with the Bicentennial on the lead, passing milepost 211 and the Feather River crossing. It was a High Line train passing through Cram. Westward train at Elsie, the east switch at Elsie. And between Elsie and James. Approaching James. A detoured Amtrak train at James. And at the east switch at James, through the massive cut. And coming off the West Branch Bridge, the westward train. This is between tunnels 5 and 6. This is from the view on top of tunnel 6, looking back at tunnel 5. And tunnel 6. Between tunnels 7 and 8, it's a dark canyon. This is on top of 8, looking at 7. And the North Fork Bridge. Westward train crossing the North Fork. The old right-of-way is still visible off to the right. And with that, I want to thank all of the photographers who are represented in this show. Without all of these people, this show would not have been possible. And with that, I will open it up to any questions that anybody has.
Well, Dale, that was absolutely a great program, and I'm sure everybody has got to really appreciate that. For those that want to ask a question, I mean, now is the time. There's a couple different ways of doing that. You can raise your hand, or you can use a reaction, which I think, I don't know, they've updated Zoom and I'm having a problem. Let me see here. No, I guess I'm not seeing it. So just raise your hand if you want to ask a question, but I would appreciate people being online and have their camera on when they want to ask. So with that, I'll open it up to the audience, and the first hand that I see belongs to Hudson Layton. Hudson, go ahead.
In the Northern Pacific collection, MPRHA collection, Wilbur Shannon, who was Chief Mechanical Officer of the NP, he was at that railroad exhibition and may have been actually on that trip west with the power, the original power. And there are photos in the collection.
Excellent. Well, good to know. And Hudson, what's the weather? Remind me where you are and what the weather's like there today.
It's balmy here in Minnesota. It's about 17 degrees.
There you go. Thank
The
you.
other day we didn't have any temperature because it was 0.
Yeah, my relatives in Wisconsin were noting that it was a little bit it was on the cool side in the Midwest right now. So thank you, Hudson. Do I see any more questions from the audience? Now's your time. And if not, I'm going to start just checking on the weather, and we'll let everybody get back to their day. And again, for those that joined the program late, my name is Jonathan Fisher. I'm the host and moderator of the program. And if you'd like to be included in a future broadcast of the Pacific Northwest Railroad Archive, please drop me a note in the chat and I will add you to our list for the future. So I'm going to call on Carrie Cochran actually in the Bay Area to give me a report on what things are like there, weather-wise.
Well, it's kind of cool. It's been sunny, no rain the last couple of weeks, so hopefully we can get some more rain and so we don't go through a drought again. But sitting next to the airport's a little noisy once in a while, but since you lived here for so long, you get used to it.
Well, there you go. So thank you, Carrie, and folks, I think that your host is going to reach out to Carrie in the future and maybe have him update us on what's going on at the Portola Museum. So Steve DeRose, CERA number 4645, give me an update on what things are like in the Windy City or that and the environs thereof. As soon as you unmute. There's Steve. What's it like there?
It's cold. It's about the same as our Minnesota respondent.
Okay.
Supposedly it's gonna. Yeah, it's about probably 20 degrees. It's supposed to get above freezing tomorrow, though.
Now, do you have any wind?
Yeah, but I'm not outside, so I can't tell you how strong it is.
Okay, fair enough. Gordon Glattenberg, are you in our audience still, Gordon? I'd like to get an update from you on Santa Clarita, California, if you're there.
Well, I was in Las Vegas last week attending the Consumer Electronics Show when all the fires started. I got back here Saturday and found that Santa Clarita here is entirely upwind from all the fires. So we've been having beautiful weather, low 70s, crystal clear, but a bit windy.
Yeah, I understand you get a little bit of breeze. Well,
Yeah.
you know, everybody is very concerned and hoping that things get under control in Southern California and the weather front. So Joel McCurry in Cary, North Carolina, what's it like on the East Coast today?
It's about to get dark and 37 degrees, 35 degrees now.
Very, very good. That's right, on the other side of the country. And my dear friend Alan Miller, Alan in Darrington, Washington, right? What's it like up there, sir?
Yeah, well, after a month of solid rain, it's cleared up a bit. So today it's clear, calm, and 45 degrees.
Very good. And good to see you, Alan. I owe you a call, and I'll be checking in with you here in the not too distant future, I promise. So,
All right.
all right. And Rufus Cohn in the great state of Montana. If you're on the line, sir, if you could update us on your weather conditions. Maybe, maybe not. Going once, going twice. So, moving right along. I want to thank everybody for being here today. If you're, well, Trent, I haven't tell me about Portland. What's it like there today? Windy?
No, it's calm, cool, 46 and sunny. Unusual for Portland.
There you go. Wonderful. And Jack Christensen, if you can unmute for a second and just to take a minute and update us on how you've been doing. Jack, Northern Pacific engineer, started with the Northern Pacific in Auburn in 1944, as I recall, right, Jack?
Well, can you hear me?
I hear you loud and clear,
Yeah.
so go right ahead.
Oh, actually, my dad was a machinist there. They were short of help during the war. I hired out as a laborer in 1942 while I was still in school. And I worked as a laborer and hostler helper. And they put me out firing. I was already enlisted in the Air Force, but they were so desperate. They put me out firing in November of 44. And I worked till with time out for military service and 9
That's a
months
World War II
trying out,
veteran, folks, by the way.
trying out another job. I don't know how they got, local chairman got me a leave of absence for 3 months increments. I used 3 of them in 1951 and decided I'd rather go back to the railroad. So it all retired in 99 after 57 years and 8 days. But it was kind of fun. I felt kind of guilty about keeping a good job from somebody else. And, you know, I got to be a little bit worried about old age and poor judgment. I decided to quit while I hadn't taken a flake of paint off or hurt anybody that I knew about. So,
But while you were ahead.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm still recovering from a broken hip, and it's not much fun, actually.
I know.
They tell me I'm going to be pretty good shape in 3 or 4 months. And seems like a long time, though.
I understand. I understand.
We're dug in one day at a time and getting there little by little.
And just for those new to the audience, you know, Jack and I have done a number of different programs together working with the NPRHA, and those programs are all available on YouTube. So if you look for John or Jack Christensen YouTube, you'll be able to see Jack and Gary Tarbox talking about a number of NPRHA kinds of programs. So we've reached the bottom of the hour, 2:30, and it's time to wrap up for today. Dale, Dale's a very, very good friend of mine, and I appreciate him taking time out because you're working on a scanning project for me and 2 magazines right now, right? What 2 are you working on?
The Union Pacific Streamliner and Penn Central Post.
The Penn Central Post. And so he had to postpone working on those to be with us today, and we're certainly appreciative of having you on the program today. Excellent program, a number of very nice comments, Dale, in the chat. I frankly knew nothing of this and know quite a bit more now than I ever knew before. So Does anybody else have anything more for the good of the order before I bring today's program to a close? Going once, going twice. Vic, did you have something before I let everybody go? Vic, go ahead. You and Dale go way back. How far back do you guys go?
More than Dale wants to admit, but probably mid-70s, early 80s.
There you go. And remember,
Dale, I
winter
can't ask
rail's
you,
coming, so go ahead, Vic.
you've answered them all. I mean, that presentation on the Oroville Dam was immense. And I'll have to talk to you after this is all over, and you know why.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
That was pretty good. And we have a lot of projects pending, so we're definitely going to have a discussion about that.
Excellent.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Good.
And tickets are still available for Winter Rail. You can buy them at the door. And if you don't want to mail me a check, there'll be plenty of tickets at the door. So we hope to see you in March 15th. That's it.
All right. Thanks, Vic. Anybody else before we wrap up on today's program? Again, I want a special thanks to our special guest, Dale Sanders, for joining us today, and come back again in 2 weeks. And our friend Gordon Glattenberg from Santa Clarita, California will be on, and we'll be talking about the LA and SL. And then February 12th, George Hardy. So we're having a great spring, and thanks everybody for being here today. And at this point, I'm going to say so long for now. Thanks for coming, and hope to see you all again in the not too distant future. So thanks everyone, and that concludes our program for today.